Good morning, guys, and welcome back to my channel. So in this video I'm trying a different technique to drawing because I want to stray away from drawing the perfect person, or at least get close to. And what I mean by that is like trying to draw like the perfect ear, the perfect eyes, the perfect nose, and the perfect mouth all in that one person to try and form the perfect person. And mainly because like that just does not exist in reality. People have exaggerated features, and of course there are very beautiful and pristine looking people in the world, but they're very, very few and far between. And if I'm trying to draw like a story scenario, or let's just say make a comic or something like that, right, and you want all these different types of characters in it, you need to learn how to exaggerate features to distinctively draw those different types of characters in any sort of pose, whether they be a few exaggerated features or a bunch of exaggerated features. The last thing you want is when you're drawing a character to draw the character and have it look like another character that's not even a part of anything, or who is a part of the situation but is playing the opposite role or something like that. You know what I mean? So ultimately, I've tried to go about this different situation of drawing a bubble and kind of coming up with a face around that bubble or within that bubble, however you want to look at it. Or even like, you create that bubble, but then you visualize kind of where everything goes in the bubble, like the eyes, the nose, the ears, and the mouth, and you modify the bubble to fit the actual facial structure, just to get it to look like a face and not some deformed art project, I suppose. So in this video as well, I decided I was going to use a little more tools to my advantage. I decided to go with a blending stump because I know it helps out a lot more when you're trying to draw. I honestly prefer to use a blending stump over fingers or any sort of other smudging device. It's just, you have this tool that's already ready to go, and when you use it enough times, it builds up a bunch of graphite. So not only can you blend with it, but you can also draw with it if you're trying to draw like a very faded sort of impression into it. Like, for example, if I'm trying to come up with a cheek, I can gently put that in instead of it being like a harsh pencil line to really edge it in as if it's like a cut on his face or something. It just gives you that extra versatility. Overall, I think this technique has helped me quite a bit to get to where I want to be with my art. It's just nice to know, like, when I go to do these type of exaggerated faces or characterized faces, like, I no longer worry about making sure everything looks right, because I'm kind of breaking the mold in a sense of like what a person is in my mind. I feel like I can, expand on the amount of expression I can put into it without deforming the face and feeling like, oh no, I did something wrong. And this is one of the reasons why whenever I go to use a reference, if I'm drawing a person, I try and stay away from magazines, because overall, like, they're designed to be, very, very attractive looking. And when you have that kind of situation, you generally only get one type of face or one type of like expression. And if that becomes your routine of drawing, of just drawing from a magazine and only getting that one type of expression, like a subtle smile or a genuine photogenic pose where someone's like kneeling down on one knee and their arms crossed over it, like it's like a very scripted sort of thing. And if you become very used to drawing that all the time, everything else is just going to look awry. Like, it's just going to be wrong. So like, yeah, pretty much like I said, like, if you draw these sort of like bubbly poses, and this doesn't need to be just a face, like, you can turn this thing into a body, no problem. And you feel a little bit more relaxed when you do that. It's a lot less perfection. You can really go in there and worry a lot less. You can pretty much have a lot of fun with it. At least I know I did. One of the nice things too is after using the blending stump into it, I love how it just kind of comes to life. Generally when I am drawing, and if I'm not using a blending stump, everything that I try and shade in gets too gritty, especially if I'm using the flat of the pencil. It just becomes very, almost like gravel or like loose sand, and it looks very graded. And there's no smooth contrast between, light and dark. So it's very nice to have that kind of add-on to a drawing, or like a variation to a drawing. Later on in the video, you'll see that I'm starting to use a little bit of cross-hatching when doing the shirt. And, I could have just stuck with the straight cross-hatching, but I wanted to make sure that the cross-hatching was not only helping me shade the shirt, but it was giving the shirt a bit of texture. And I don't know 100% if it's going to come through on the video very well, that you're going to be able to see the texture of it. But I do go over it again with a blending stump gently, just to help the shading kind of through, because ultimately shadows, they're very smooth, and their transition is very smooth unless they reach a sheer drop in the object, or like a crevice within the object. For example, like wrinkles, or if you're drawing like a machine of some kind, right? You have those sharp edges where it just drops suddenly and then it goes flat again. All those types of things really divvy up the shading, but that's really the only time where shading becomes a harsher sort of gradient between light and dark. So, I mean, that's one of the things to keep in mind. Fur is a little bit different because you're dealing with so many different colors within fur, especially if there's like a pattern involved, or even hair for that matter. Like if you were to look into a mirror, right, it just depends on how the light source hits hair or fur or whatever. Because you're going to have some hairs that are maybe a little bit grayer than others. You're going to have other hairs where they're catching a little bit more light because they may stick out suddenly. And it's just these types of things where you're eventually going to get used to drawing that type of textile or texture of some kind, right? And you'll figure out the gist of it. And ultimately, however far you want to take it, it's all up to you. As long as you're getting the main gist across, and people, when they look at it, are going to see that it's fur or hair or cloth or whatever, who gives a shit? I mean, you proved, that's what that is. So move on. It's a little bit harder if you're trying to make a very simple drawing with just grayscale, and say you're drawing something like wood against a rock. But, you're going to learn that with wood, it's got a grain to it, and it's going to follow the grain. And that's generally where, if you're not shading, right, that's generally where your textures are going to come in really handy, because you're not going to have a grain that's just going to cross across all the other grains. Whereas with rocks, there is no grain to it, from my understanding. It's just sometimes it cracks and chips, and that's where you have to really exploit that to make sure you're not matching the wood that the rock might be sitting on, So ultimately, I had a lot of fun with this drawing. I was able to relax quite a bit, which was nice, because usually I'm very uptight, and especially if I haven't drawn in a while, it's really weird. Like if I erase too many times in a row, I start to get angry, and then the world just becomes overheated. Like everything around me just becomes hot, and I can't focus on anything, and then I try and draw again, and I'm ready to just snap the pencil in half. I'm like, okay, I got to take a large break. So yeah, this is one of like the few times where I didn't feel like that overheating, which I don't even understand how that actually happens to me. I think it's just because I'm bottled up with so much like frustration. But yeah, so either way, I think I'm going to cut her there. I hope this video really helped. Yeah, so take care.